Chicago.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and here we are on another broadcast of Meet the Chicago Historians on Monday, November the 21st, the year 2011. I'm John DeVita, and, of course, we have our panel all standing by to start our today's program. So right now, let's turn it over to our moderator, Jack Ryan. Good afternoon, Jack.
Good afternoon, folks. Good afternoon, John. And it's good to be here today. It's a beautiful day outside. By the time you're listening to this, of course, this will also be history. But we're going to do our best. We're a little decimated in our troops this morning, or this afternoon, excuse me. And we'll do our best because we all know how to talk. We all have the gift of gab, and we love doing this. And so anyway, we had decided, in as much as tomorrow is the 22nd of November and the anniversary of the Kennedy assassination in 1963, which would make it the 45th? No, more than that.
No.
63 to now is 48th anniversary.
48th, yeah.
48th anniversry. It's hard to believe. It's incredible.
Coming up on half a century. Just think
right.
It'll be half a century.
It's like ancient now, I mean, if you're a kid now, especially, but, all of us, I know, remember where we were when that happened.
Yeah.
But let's just talk about that a little bit. The topic will be today, we'll have tragedies and atrocities of our time, tragedy and atrocity are similar but not quite the same. To me, atrocity is planned on you.
Right.
Tragedy just happens. These storms or whatever, earthquakes, and those are tragedies. Atrocity is 9/11, prime example, which even was more cold-blooded to me and more murderous than Pearl Harbor, which actually had military targets as its objective, even though it was a sneak attack. Anyway, going back to the Kennedy assassination. Okay, let's introduce ourselves. Who isn't here first? Okay, you guys don't talk now. Nobody who's here will say anything. Present, we got, to my left, John Koshelko.
Good to be with you.
And Ken Little.
And good to be here also.
Ken Little, charter member?
Charter member.
Charter member of the group?
Yeah.
And John, you come with us, a little over a year ago or so?
It's been a year and a half or more, I think. It's been a while since I've had the opportunity to be a part of this group.
And you were Cicero?
I was a town trustee and later town assessor. I was a town assessor for about 11 years. I was a state representative briefly in the Illinois General Assembly back in the days of the multi-member districts before they had the cutback amendment. Served with Judy Topinka from the old 7th District and have a master's degree in history and love history and do a lot of lecturing and public speaking.
Are you a lawyer?
No.
Oh, good.
Everyone, it's funny, I had an interesting experience when I was down in Springfield. I was in the men's room, as a matter of fact, and one of the other legislators was standing there combing his hair, and he said to me, it used to be better down here when there weren't all these non-lawyer legislators, when guys like us used to be able to run things down here. And I said, gee, I'm sorry to tell you this, but I'm not a lawyer. Yeah. He says, you're not. Everybody assumes you are. Everybody here thinks you're a lawyer.
Well, you got something on the ball. You know what you're talking about. Yeah. You're interested. Well, it's...
Yeah, and you got answers.
Yeah, I worked with a guy when I was involved with labor, Bill Gibbons from the United Paperworkers International Union. People just assumed he was a lawyer. He was so up on things. He was articulate. He could wing it. He could talk about anything. No, he's no lawyer. I don't even know if he had a college education at all. But he sure could have done something with it.
Thank you.
But we're glad we're all here anyway. And Bill and Ken, I almost called you Bill. Ken, your background. You're a professor.
I'm Bill now.
You're Bill.
I'll bill you. That's a good lawyer thing. No, I'm not a professor, but my background is I was in the fire alarm office. I was a senior fire alarm operator. Put 35 years dispatching ambulances, fire trucks to tragedies, and as you call them, not atrocities but tragedies. And then I started teaching at Wright College, and I just finished my actually. I'll be starting my 20th year. It's hard to believe, isn't it, to have a second career that long? And it's going great. And I've co-authored 4 books on the history of the fire department. I'm sort of a fire department historian. Really have an official one. And I have a big family, and we have a son who's a battalion chief in the fire department downtown. And I'm proud of all the kids, and known John DeVita for many years, our host here. And so I just love, as John said, I love Chicago history, and my thing is, the history of Chicago, really. I tried to be a big fish in a small town, or a small fish in a big town, whatever. But I see you want to talk a little bit about maybe nationwide. You start with the Kennedy assassination.
I have a cousin who's a fire battalion chief also.
Oh, okay.
His kids call him Daddy, though.
Daddy?
Eddie Ryan, we call him.
Eddie Ryan.
Ed Ryan, yeah.
Yeah, he's one of the new kids, so I don't know him.
Yeah. And your son's name is what?
Steve Little.
Steve, okay.
Yeah, he's in Battalion 1. Downtown.
Where's downtown?
The firehouse is at Engine 13, 259 North Columbus Drive.
Oh, okay, over there in the new,
Yeah,
okay.
and
the hotels and that over there?
He has, the real estate he has, from Roosevelt Road to North Avenue, from basically the lake to the river, He's got all those high rises.
That's downtown.
That's downtown, so.
Where all the lights are bright, huh?
Yeah, John just mentioned he was a town assessor for many years in Cicero. You can imagine assessing all the high-rise buildings downtown. It's got to be in the billions of dollars. And
incredible, isn't it?
Incredible, yeah.
There are figures that we just can only barely imagine.
Yeah.
It's like Carl Sagan was talking about millions of stars.
Billions and billions of stars.
Lots of stars.
Yeah, it's
My
true.
spaceship of the mind.
Yeah.
So,
We ought to mention. You mentioned our host. We ought to say that we are taping this show at the John DeVita Broadcast Center.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Undisclosed section of Norwich. We've pinpointed it now.
Yeah.
Anyway, for you are out there, come on over. We won't be here by the time you get here, but come on over anyway. So, okay, number one. Tomorrow is the anniversary of Kennedy, as we were saying. 53 years. Am I right?
No, 48.
48 years. Okay.
I
never was very good at math. That was my week's.
Close enough for government work.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
For sure. Okay, everyone can kind of remember what was going on and when you first heard this.
I was in school. I was at Fenwick High School. We had just come back from our lunch break. You go down to the cafeteria. We were in our first afternoon class. And, of course, they had loudspeakers in all the rooms, and the announcement came over from the Dean of Discipline, because the microphone was in the Dean of Discipline's office, that the president had been shot.
Yes.
Not that he was dead, that the president had been shot, and we're awaiting further developments. Well, everything came to a standstill.
Yeah.
And everyone's talking, and the priest of course, a Catholic school, we prayed, and then it was maybe 15 to 20 minutes later that the announcement came over the Dean of Discipline. I can remember, the president is dead. I remember exactly how he said it. He said, the president is dead, with the emphasis on is. And, you're just absolutely dumbfounded. So we went down to, they had an impromptu mass in the auditorium. We all went to mass. We left. You're just completely stunned. And on the way home, I stopped on Roosevelt Road and Ridgeland, and I picked up a newspaper, which I still had, which had these headlines that were about 8 inches or 10 inches high. JFK shot, near death. So this was the first paper. This was when they still put out sort of like extra editions.
Yeah.
JFK shot near death. So, that was... And I can remember it was a cold, dismal day, dark, coming home. Of course, it's late November already.
Yeah.
And I remember coming home then, and we had taken over. My grandparents had run a grocery business on the first floor of our building, and they had retired in the summer of '63. And my dad and mom had taken over the business, and we were remodeling the the apartment behind it. We had a TV on, and that's where I saw on this black and white set the Air Force One returning to Washington, and that chaotic scene as if you remember when the casket, there was no ceremony at all when the casket was being taken off of Air Force One and placed into the automobile, the hearse, and then President Johnson, who had been just a few hours earlier had been Vice President Johnson, came and delivered a short address to the nation. And I remember the way he said, "I ask your help and God's," and that was the finale of the speech. And the whole weekend, of course, the whole nation came to a standstill.
Absolutely.
And you watched television. You just watched all of this happening.
Yeah.
And I remember my father on Monday, of course, which was the day of the funeral. My parents, like businesses all across the country, they closed our store out of respect. And I remember my dad asked me, "Do you have a portrait of President Kennedy?" And I had just been given because I was a great admirer of Kennedy as a kid. And I had just been given a beautiful color photograph of President Kennedy by my aunt and uncle, and I had it in a frame. So my dad said, "Can I borrow that?" I said, "Of course." So he took it and he put it in the window. He put it in the window of the, and I think back now, I've seen pictures of when Lincoln died, people having pictures of Lincoln, or when McKinley or President Roosevelt died, they would have the president's picture in the window. So it reminded me very much.
They would often border it in black trim,
right?
Crepe.
Right.
Yeah. Jack's looking at me. We had just moved into our house where I still live, at 4830 Patterson. Excuse me. And we had moved in August, and there was something stuck in our gutter. So I was out on a ladder, and it was it was sort of a cold day too.
Now you're a married guy with your own family now.
Yeah, I was married, and we had just had triplets, as a matter of fact. So we had
show off.
Yeah, show off. And my wife had just given birth in October. To baby number 8, and it was the reason we had to buy and get more room. Obviously, 4-bedroom house. And my wife came out and she said, just exactly what John said. The president has been shot. And so I came down off the ladder. In fact, it was getting dark out, and so I don't know. I would guess it was maybe like 3 in the afternoon when she heard it, but you Emily heard it earlier. And you know what? I read this, and so it's not an original thought, but somebody once said, "I don't think we've ever recovered. The nation's really ever completely recovered from that shock." Yeah. Why would a young guy, who was, it was maybe not Camelot as it turns out, but it was a happy time in this country, real happy, hopeful. Yeah.
There's a feeling that I've seen, and I agree. I've always agreed with this, that there was a period of history that began with VJ Day, when World War II ended, and lasted until the assassination of John F. Kennedy. We call it the 50s, but it reaches back into the late 40s, the time after World War II when Truman was president, and it extends into the 60s. But when Kennedy died, something changed in the country. What comes after that is very different from that period of nearly 20 years before.
Yeah, the country goes almost into a tailspin, really, with King assassination, cynicism, with
war in Vietnam,
Bobby Kennedy, who's now there's another Kennedy. Look at the tragedy of the Kennedy family, with a daughter, with a lobotomy, and
going back to the war, the eldest son,
Joe gets killed in
that special mission. That he was flying.
Right, and and then 2 of the boys get assassinated, and it's just
Another thing, you're talking with 50 years. The thing I like to do these parallels in history. Think of it in 2 years when we reach the 50th anniversary, we will be as far away from John F. Kennedy as Kennedy was from Woodrow Wilson.
That's right.
It'll be as far away as 1913 was in 1963. So when you think of, Woodrow Wilson, we think of being so far in the past, and now we're at that point that we're that far removed from John F. Kennedy.
I think we give different values to the years depending on our age. Like, it was 20 years between the end of World War II and when I got out of high school was a lot more than the 20 years that's just gone by. We lived in our house or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you know what the
In your
difference is that, and I, because I teach history, people are not interested in reading that much about history that they personally experienced. I find, for example, I do the Chicago history. And by the way, it would take 6 years to do my class, so I flunk everybody, so they have to come back. But they don't want to hear the history of, say, Chicago past, say, Richard J. Daley. They really don't. Jane Byrne or Blandick or Young Richie. They're not, because
That's not history. That's journalism.
That's right. Exactly. It is not history. So
I want to say familiarity breeds contempt, right?
well, you don't have to preach it to anybody or tell it to anybody because they lived through it, so they know the history.
Yeah,
so,
that's not history to me. Yeah.
No, it's
That's yesterday.
It's yesterday, right? So. And they don't like to go in the very early history. Why, I don't know. The early history, to me, is fascinating. Fort Dearborn and all that. We started around the Civil War, and then because by that time Chicago was pretty well established.
A real city. Then.
Yeah. And the other thing, too, that as you get into history, you start to realize the national influence, like we're talking here. In just a year, how, for example, how World War II affected Chicago, or other things, the Prohibition, how it affected Chicago. And just a year before Kennedy's assassination, he was in town here, and he was involved. Briefed on the Cuban Missile Crisis. And he had just landed at O'Hare, and he was here a day, and he said, he had to go back to Washington. He had a cold or something.
The artificial cold.
The artificial cold. And you know what? I was in the fire department, and we had a couple of meetings, and they said, this is extremely serious. They really thought that the possibility of us going to war was a reality, and how it would affect us.
When he left Chicago, I think that was one of the few times that he wore a hat, because they wanted to create that image that he wasn't feeling well and that he had to be bundled up, so he had on a hat.
Yeah.
He had that top hat at the inauguration, but he never had it on. He was holding it, tipping it to his father, but he never wore it.
Yeah.
Remember, so I got that
last time so far that a top hat has been worn at a presidential inauguration.
But you say your course takes 6 years?
Well, if...
Just like my high school.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Your 4-year course, you did it in 6 years. That's pretty good, Jack. Okay. What it is, I have an accumulation of about 6,000 to 9,000 slides. I'm still using slides and a slide projector. So, but I'm very selective, in what I project. But, it would take about... I do about 1,000 slides. I'd bring 140 every session, but I like to have people talk. I like to have, and these mostly are senior citizens, and all of us grew up in an atmosphere of school of speak only when you're spoken to or asked, and so I let them talk. And anybody, in fact, anytime I ever give any kind of a dissertation, it's if you have a question, put your hand up and let's do it right now. Don't wait until it's all over with, And if you don't understand something I'm saying, why,
None of these slides. Do you do a head first slide or the hook slide? Or?
I was pretty good.
Pee Wee Herman or
you know what you want
Babe
to
know?
Herman. Pee Wee Herman. Now you're
that's
talking.
Else.
Yeah, you're talking one of my favorite, serious dramatic actor. You know what we used to do, Jack? I grew up next to the elevated tracks. We used to slide. We had a sliding pit we made under the L tracks. And now you can't walk under the L tracks, but in those days, and particularly if it was raining or snowing, I would go to, the east-west under the tracks.
See, that was very utilitarian on your part. Use of, use of land, right?
Absolutely. We used to play all the games there. You could, climb up. I was going to say climb up the, the big X pillar supports. And
I remember guys in the neighborhood. The Inglewood-Howard line ended at Loomis
At
and 63rd.
Loomis Street, yeah.
I know guys in the neighborhood. I know some of them that used to actually climb up and get on that way and
Yeah.
take a ride.
Yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah, I've heard of guys doing it at the Sedgwick Street stop, which is still active. But I never, I never did it. And why take a chance? You're always afraid of getting electrocuted or something, or getting hit by a train.
Now,
I would say I mentioned Babe Herman because I read a story once that he was called out at third base, coming from second to third, and he didn't slide. He went in running, and they nailed him. And when he got in, I think DeRocher was the manager. Why didn't you slide? He was signaling him to slide. He said, because I just bought up some new cigars and I had them in my pocket and I didn't want to get them mashed when I slid into third base.
Yeah, character.
He was really a character.
What years did he play though?
I guess late 20s to late 30s or so.
Yeah.
Great hitter, but a very terrible fielder. You had a ball hit him in the head one time. And,
well, the White Sox. Not to get off the subject. They had a outfielder named Smead Jolly in the 30s.
Yeah.
Now, supposedly this guy was a really good hitter. I think it was from one of the. They didn't have as many college boys in those days, but he was an Arkansas boy, and he could hit. But as far as a brown ball goes, they said he'd be in right field and the ball would go through his legs and bounce off the wall, and bounce back through his legs coming off the wall.
That happened one time. He took 3 errors. Yeah, it went through his leg, hit the wall. Then he turned around and was trying to run it down and went through his legs again. He picked it up and threw it away.
3 errors on one.
3 errors on, yeah.
Anyway.
By the way, the blowing of the sirens when the Sox won the pennant,
yes.
that could be listed. I don't know if you would call it a tragedy or not, but it certainly was.
Certainly upset a lot of
It
people.
was upset. And I was listening to the game. They were playing in Cleveland, and when they won the pennant, and I went outside and they were blown from the fire alarm office.
September 22nd, 1959.
This is the height of the Cold War, so
Yeah.
an air raid siren wasn't funny.
The Russians are coming.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and but and I said, you know what? That they're celebrating. Mayor Daley is, but the fire department took the heat on that because they. I used to dial the siren. All of us.
And then didn't they rush through a proclamation through City Hall next day or something?
I don't recall that.
Of course, that's kind of ex post facto, isn't it? Yeah. I'm not a lawyer, but I know what that means.
Yeah. What does it mean?
After the fact.
After the fact. Yeah. They. But. Yeah, and I knew exactly what. And it was late. It was about 11 o'clock at night.
Right.
It seemed like it was a Saturday night or something.
No, it was a weeknight.
It was a weeknight. Maybe a Wednesday.
Oh, okay.
Something like that.
I was off.
They were playing the Cleveland Indians.
Right. Yeah. That had to be a high point or a low point.
Yeah, incredible.
It made the civil offense people
that must have been
unhappy.
Locally pretty much the same effect as the War of the Worlds broadcast had.
Yeah,
on a smaller scale, but sure,
locally because we could see the lady across the street. She had no idea what was going on, sitting on the front porch. She's looking around,
Oh yeah.
I know one guy, a good friend of mine, Bill Boyd. I haven't seen this man in years now. He's probably not with us anymore. But he was a salesman for R.H. Donnelly, Yellow Pages.
Okay.
And somebody he worked with didn't have a radio in his car. The guy's coming back, and he hears all this going on. And of course, it scared the bejesus out of him. And when he found out what it was, he made up his mind to go ahead and do what he wanted. He wanted to start his own business. He said, I'm not wasting any more time. He changed his mind. I mean, I guess he was successful, as I understand.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned, it kind of reminds me of the Kennedy assassination. There was a story, I think it might have been Dan Rather, who was there on the scene. He was a young reporter. He was not the anchor man. Mm-hmm. And he sees it unfold. And naturally, there are no cell phones in 1963. He runs to a phone booth, gets on the phone to the main office in New York, and says, the president has just been shot. And the receptionist or the secretary, whoever took the call, dropped the phone, was so startled, dropped the phone, ran away, started telling people, and completely forgot that he was on the line. So he says, here I am with the story of the century and no one to tell it to.
Yeah.
And he's hollering into the phone and nothing. Because
he was a Texan. He was probably down there, right?
The word is spreading throughout the headquarters, and nobody's taking the story from him.
You know what? I thought you were going to say that the girl said, what do you mean the president of like ABC or something?
Yeah.
No, the president of the United States.
I go like, yeah, right.
Yeah, right.
Which is kind of like, I'm a few years older than you. I was a senior at St. Rita at the time. And we're coming back from lunch. Yeah, Kennedy's been shot. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Like this is.
How can they shoot the president? The guy's got 1 million people around him.
Right. You know.
Yeah,
This was something that happened in history. This was something
Yeah.
that happened in the 19th
Before.
century.
We don't do that
We didn't
anymore.
conceive of this
No,
happening
no,
today.
no.
There's the Secret Service.
And everybody liked the guy, you know. I mean, I still don't. You know, we've all read, you know, everything that's ever printed. I still don't know what the hell happened. Truthfully,
No.
is it really true?
Do any of us? I mean, I'm not a big conspiracy guy, but
I'm not
I'm sure
either.
we don't know everything that
No.
happened on there.
Yeah,
I know. I accept the fact that Lee Harvey Oswald was not happy with the United States of America. He didn't like the United States. He defected to the Soviet Union. He did everything he could to provide whatever meager services he thought he could provide to the Soviets. And I think he was a little man who wanted to make his mark in history, and by killing the President of the United States.
Perfect fall guy.
you think?
I don't buy
Do you
that.
think? By the way, he bought the rifle in Chicago. You know?
From Klein's.
Was it Klein's?
Klein's, yeah.
Out on Madison
Now,
Street somewhere.
Bobby De Silva was a corner man I knew from,
Yeah.
he was down over, I think he was at LaSalle and LaSalle in Washington, and Klein's was like a half a block west of there, almost at Wells. Klein's, the store.
You know what I read, that the store that he bought it from was, and it wasn't like, it was like in the 4600 block of Madison, and
Well,
I can't even picture a store.
There was a
out
Klein.
there.
He says now,
Yeah.
months later, he remembers seeing a guy. He used to shoot himself, not shoot himself, but he was a shooter.
He was a
and he would
shooter.
go around Klein's, and he remembers seeing a guy in there that looked like Oswald with a guy that looked like Ruby. That's what he said.
Yeah.
This is later, like
Yeah.
So he could never put anything to that, but.
That's true. And then Ruby was a Chicagoan who was well known on Maxwell Street.
Jake
you know.
Rubenstein.
Is that really?
Yeah. Gangster,
Yeah,
low-level gangster.
Yeah. And you know, and there again, Lee Harvey Oswald never had a chance to testify, or because why did Ruby? Was that a setup too? He shoots. The
Well,
guy
it's like
and
perfect.
how does he get shot? Here
By Saturday, was it Saturday or Sunday morning? Was it Sunday morning?
Sunday morning, I was
National
watching the
television.
TV live.
Right, everybody was.
yeah.
And they're bringing Oswald out, and it's like a promenade. They're just I remember that they're
Yeah.
walking
Everybody
very
places-
kind of
right.
carelessly.
Yeah, right, yeah.
I remember this the guy with the Stetson.
Yeah, right,
And,
yeah.
and the reporters,
Good old
and
boy.
everyone's pushing and shoving, and
Yeah.
there's not the kind of today you'd have guys with
Oh.
with automatic rifles and flak
Take 'em out
jackets
the
and
back way or
Take him out the
something.
back
Yeah.
way. Yeah.
Dress him up as a copper or something.
Yeah,
or
right.
anything.
Yeah.
But not at that time. Well, but we were a different country. See, we were a different country in night. We hadn't experienced in 1963 what
No.
we've experienced since.
Yeah.
But as I said, I'm not a big believer in that conspiracy theories, but it seems to be a lot more to this than we're being told now. For one thing, that rifle was a piece of junk. They couldn't possibly. Marksmen have not been able to fire that off as quickly as a couple of shots were supposed to be.
No,
it was an
you-
Italian import of some kind. Wasn't it a cheapie?
But I've
I'm doing
I thought it was
a blank
German.
on-
Like it was similar to a Mauser, as I understand. It was a bolt action.
Yeah,
bolt
it
It
action.
was a
Single
bolt
action.
Yeah.
Yeah. Boom,
Yeah.
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 And he got 3 shots off.
But I do remember CBS some years back. They did an extensive analysis, and I seem to remember that they got an identical weapon,
Yeah.
and they demonstrated that you could indeed get that many. A marksman could indeed get that many shots off in the space of time that it happened.
And I saw other studies that said the opposite with guys who were marksmen too. So
Yeah, I think it was an Italian make, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It's an odd, not an expert on guns, but
no, me either. I just had to
Yeah.
have one.
yeah,
It's on the side of Law and Order. So
School book depository.
yeah,
yeah,
but,
right.
That and as you said with the killing and with Ruby being so distraught that he wanted to save Mrs. Kennedy the trouble of going to court. Remember that? That's what trial.
Yeah.
That's what was his excuse.
And
was.
then he dies of cancer. He never goes to trial either, right?
Well, he
think
was he died in
jailed,
prison. He
yeah.
died in
Yeah,
jail.
but
He must have.
he never. I don't recall, why he shot Ruby. Why Ruby shot Oswald.
Yeah.
Well, that was what he was apparently, and people who knew him at the time said he was just totally crushed by it. He apparently was a great admirer of Kennedy, and they said that he was really down in the dumps over this, much more so than the whole country was distraught. But he took it personally, and he wanted to do something about it.
Yeah, could he have been programmed to,
So what day was the assassination? Do you remember? Was it
It was Friday.
Friday. It was Friday.
Friday.
Okay, it was the last day of the
Friday.
week.
Yeah.
And so I know the NFL took a lot of criticism for not canceling their schedule that
Yeah.
Sunday following
Yeah.
that.